Welcome to Concussion Fix Minisodes. These bite-sized clips are taken directly from our full podcast episodes to give you direct answers to your specific questions about persistent concussion symptoms and recovery. Short, clear, and packed with value. Now remember that these clips are not medical advice and you should always speak with your healthcare provider before attempting anything you hear on this channel. Let's go.
So there are a few comments, a few questions that were put in the comments. So the first one is, as a parent to a toddler and another baby on the way, how can I still implement the recovery mindset section when I'm running on almost empty already? And the sleep hygiene section when I'm in constant sleep deprived state and it won't be ending for a few years as new baby will also require support throughout the night.
Great question. And it's a really hard chapter if you've sustained something like a concussion to then be also in this postpartum journey. I think that the best invitation is to be gentle with yourself and allow yourself to slow down in life in the ways that you can, right? Sleep deprivation is going to be part of your picture for a while. I say to people though, if they find that, post-concussion, there's a lot of significant challenges, seeing if it's within your means or within the capacity that you have to get some extra help with that. So I know Dr. Paul will probably have something to say about the importance of sleep, but seeing whether or not there's a possibility to help you get that sleep if you're finding that's a huge impairment to your concussion recovery. I know dozens of clients who needed that following injury or illness in the postpartum period where it was like, you know what, the recommendation to them was that they needed at least 5 hours at a time. So what can you do to support yourself to get that? And what does that look like? Maybe it's adjusting what your breastfeeding journey you had pictured it to be. That's always a big one for moms. Maybe there's a way to do some pumping and some bottle feeding, having somebody help with getting up in the middle of the night so that you can get that 5 hours that is often recommended at one time for REM sleep. I bet you Dr. Paul will know that a bit more specifically than I do. Other than that, it might be this sort of gentle process of reevaluating all the things you have to do in a day during that time in your life when you're postpartum and healing from concussion. So really simplifying, being kind and gentle to yourself for everything you're going through, and seeing, if you can kind of go on the kiddos' schedules, rest when they rest when they're napping. I know it can be so tempting to want to do all the things around the house or do what you can or take some time to yourself when the kiddos are napping, but sort of shifting that mindset to can I rest when they rest can be really supportive, not only for concussion recovery, but to getting through that postpartum period. Those are kind of the two things coming to my mind right now. Dr. Paul, I'm not sure if you had any more sort of evidence-based information around how much sleep is needed to sort of support concussion recovery.
I think in terms of a minimum, I'm going to say that it's my experience that it's really different for everybody. So some people can thrive off 5 hours of sleep. Some people don't thrive at all. I always say that, that is something that each individually people have to figure out if that's what's going to work for them. And then, this is a really fascinating conversation around, a time of your life that you really need extra support and also someone's so intimately dependent on you to support them. So I think that, Melinda, your suggestions are brilliant. I think that that's a really helpful way of kind of figuring out, is there support that people can give you, really minimizing the extra things there's some fascinating cultural evidence actually where people in Asian communities for the first month, they're just really almost nesting and they're not out. I remember with our second child, my wife felt so amazing. It was such an easy delivery that it was something that she was able to go to the mall within a couple of days. And honestly, that is not recommended. And so, I mean, I think this is an added stressor for you. And in my opinion, find ways to really declutter anything else. And that's probably, a probably good place to start. There's really no other kind of way to get around that this baby's requirement. How old is the baby? Can you remind
There's
me?
one on the way and a toddler.
Oh, okay. So how old's the toddler? 2?
It
Probably.
didn't specify, just said toddler.
Okay, toddler. Um, it's tough because now you have all these hormones of pregnancy that are being thrown around in there. Lynn, I know you're shaking your head because you've been through this before. We all have. We're all parents.
Yeah.
The one fun thing from a naturopathic perspective, I really will emphasize is that this is a time that you really want to kind of support your body's adrenal system. And so things like bone broths, things like adrenal formulations, this is a great time for a naturopath to kind of if they're not on board already, to give you some support that is safe during pregnancy, is safe during lactation, and you're going to be able to kind of like really get nourished. Like that is going to, if you need a meal service for a while, then do that. The sleep is a challenge, and it's a bit of a catch-22 because I'm such a big fan of breastfeeding. And so trying to unload that to do like formula, maybe in extreme situations is necessary if you really need that sleep. I think pumping is a good idea, but just note, you really underestimate the nutrition that moms need during this time. So it's like everything you can do to get like smoothies, like over and above your meals, smoothies and electrolytes and minerals and bone broths and soups and stews is all going to be really, really helpful. We feel for you because we've all been there without a concussion, so we know how hard that can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only other thing that was coming to mind is just reevaluating expectations. So, especially as a mother, like there might be certain expectations you have on yourself of how you should parent. But if you have a concussion as well, it may not be the best to be pushing yourself to meet those expectations. Now, of course, we don't know what those are, but every parent, especially mothers, have expectations on how they want to show up for their kids. So sometimes it's okay to reevaluate those, particularly when you're trying to recover from a concussion. So whether that's like we mentioned with breastfeeding, because sometimes, a great example of an expectation is to exclusively breastfeed, but that may not work during a concussion recovery. So there may be other ways to do that. Like we already mentioned, pumping, having someone bottle feed, to give you that extra rest, that extra break. Now, that's just an example that comes to mind, but there's lots of other ways we can look at reducing those expectations or shifting expectations during a concussion period. Those could also be things like, what are your expectations to be a good mom? And do you have to cook everything from scratch? And is there a way to support yourself to, buy some already cut up vegetables that you can just throw into a pot and cook a stew? Or can you do more crock pots? Or maybe you need to ask for help and get someone to make you food and bring you food. These are all things that can help sort of modify the workload following, especially if you're preparing to bring in a new baby to the world. And that's going to be, come with its whole host of other demands.
Totally, yeah. Great suggestion, Linda.
Or support from grandparents potentially, or maybe you have a spouse that can take a parental leave as well. Like that would be super, super helpful to offload. Yeah.
Postpartum doulas as well. They are a big thing, and research has shown that those help a lot too with new parents, is having that person there.
Yeah, sometimes that toddler is an X factor. It's like they're so full on that they're the ones that are exhausting you. So if you're like, okay, like can we get some support here that obviously fits with your values,
Yeah.
and obviously your resources, whether it's a doula, whether it's a nanny, whether it's family support, whether it's daycare part-time, for half a day. Like we've done all this in ourselves, our own family personally, and we still are very like much focused on like connection and relationship and attachment parenting. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting creative, not being afraid to get creative with some different ways to do things for now.
okay.
Awesome. All right. Next question. I hit my head hard on the edge of a kitchen cupboard door yesterday when I went bent down to pick something up off the floor. I felt dizzy, somewhat headachy after it happened, and was even more fatigued than usual last night. Today, I'm still feeling all these symptoms in my vision that had taken months to clear after my last concussion 8 months ago is back to being blurry again. I also have a stiff neck and more head pressure. The head pressure had never really cleared after the last concussion. The concussion I had 8 months ago was one of the many, and aside from a moderate TBI I had years ago, which involved a skull fracture and an epidural hematoma, has been the slowest to recover. I have watched the video on concussion clips, but I'm still not sure how to tell which is a concussion clip and which is a concussion.
My question back is, what does it matter? It doesn't matter either way. Was it another concussion? I don't know. Was it a concussion cliff? I don't know. Doesn't matter because the treatment is the same. So if you had another concussion, what are you going to do? You're going to double down on diet. You're going to try to calm the nervous system. You're going to try and get, some light exercise. You're going to try and, take it easy for a couple days. You're going to try and prioritize sleep, right? It's the same exact thing if it was a cliff or if it was a concussion. So people often get hung up on the idea of like, oh no, was this another concussion? The answer really doesn't matter because the treatment and the process is the exact same whether it was or it wasn't. You just want to support yourself in this period, similar to what we were talking about with our, I don't know if it was somebody early on that was having the same issue. So yeah, don't worry about if it was or it wasn't, just do the things you got to do.
Great. And another one here. So I did get a very long write-up, so I've kind of condensed it and then just have the question at the end. They have complex PTSD, and a lot of nervous system dysregulation is the biggest challenge. They are doing grounding skills and integrating it with the Concussion Fix program already. They realize that inward focus, such as breath work, is too overwhelming, and so they've shifted the focus to external sensory input. They've discovered that smelling a cherry-scented eraser had a strong calming effect on them, and so since then they've started to experiment with different scents. They use scent. They were in a waiting room where there's a very strong scent of coffee, though, that was a trigger factor for them. Was not helpful. But they found sitting in front of a scented candle reduced fatigue. So they've been exploring different sensory aspects. Had a weighted blanket, which found that really helped them a lot. So now the question is, do you have other ideas on how they can incorporate touch, taste, and particular smell in trying to balance out their nervous system? Any advice on what I need to focus on or experiment with further after all my newfound discoveries about myself?
Yeah, well, it's great to hear that this person has been able to sort of experiment with different ways of helping to support a calming effect, and that, they're willing to sort of try different things to figure that out. So that's always a big part, is being willing to sort of experiment a little bit. So that's great. What I'm hearing is the process of what's happening is when you're present with a scent or was it a sound? What was the other one? There was sense, and then there was an
The
example
weighted
of
blanket really helps.
oh,
So
the
scent
weighted
and weighted
blanket. Thank
blanket.
you. So when there's a scent or a feeling, it's bringing a sense of safety to the body. Usually the weighted blanket is that sends a signal to the brain that you can calm down, right? It activates our parasympathetic system. How it works with scents is that usually we become very present to the scent. And that enables sort of, in essence, letting our guard down a little bit so that we're not in that high alert sympathetic state. So this is how mindfulness works, right? We're engaging we're putting all of our attention to one aspect of our experience, and then everything else kind of fades away in the background because we can't focus intently on one aspect of our experience and also simultaneously be thinking and doing 5 other things, right? So this focused attention, this building a skill of focused attention, is sort of the point of some of these sensory exercises in mindfulness. So I'm hearing that this individual is able to identify senses they'd like, senses that aren't working, which is great. I would say, finding different ways to engage that system. So if the weighted blanket worked, perhaps something like mindful walking would work. So finding your feet against the ground, feeling the pressure of your feet against the ground as you're walking, that can send a very grounding feeling in the body and promote that parasympathetic nervous system activation. Similarly, we recently did a somatics live in which we did seated practices that were able to engage, pressure on our hands, pressure against the wall, pressure against with our feet against the ground in a lunge position. So if a weighted blanket works, I'm curious whether other things like that would also be very helpful for you. So that may be something to review is the somatics live that we did recently. As far as the sense, doing more of the ones that are calming and just taking the rest into consideration. Okay, so that was activating for me, right? You obviously have a heightened sense of, what is resonating and what doesn't resonate, or what might sort of activate your nervous system versus calm your nervous system. And that's all things just to sort of take into account so that you know. And the point might be to build a toolbox of these skills, whether that's in grounding or mindfulness or other, that support you when you need them. So you might be doing the, quote unquote research, creating hypotheses and then testing them to see what skills and techniques and tools can I put in my toolbox so that I have them available to me when I need them. And the other point you mentioned is that you'd like to do them consistently, I think, or that there's an interest in sort of doing a lot of these nervous system regulation pieces, I believe. And that's great. So once you've got your toolbox full, implementing them consistently, even when you don't need them, can really help build that foundation for regulating nervous system dysfunction. I think that's all I really have to go on for that question.
Dr. Herkel, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Well, no, I think Melinda covered it, honestly. There's really nothing, I don't really know too much about sense. So yeah.
Great. And I know I'm talking to the member also about olfactory system and all that, because it's very powerful, our olfactory system.
Yeah, you might have some
and
training in that with the aromatherapy and things that you have experiences with. So encouraging that as well.
Thanks for listening to this Concussion Fix Minisode. If you want to learn more about the causes of persistent concussion symptoms and how to fix them, join one of our upcoming free 90-minute patient webinars. Details and sign-up links are in the description. You'll see that with the right approach, recovery is possible. See you there.